Hello everyone. Today I went all out with doubloons on my EU account since I have about 400,000 of them, and I whaled myself the ZF-6, the new dockyard ship or shipyard ship, the German Tier 9 destroyer. I'm divisioning with Maltese, and we're up against Tier 10 matchmaking with a Tier 10 carrier, so of course we have to play quite a bit safer. I will be comparing the ZF-6 quite extensively with the Z-46 because, well, both German Tier 9 destroyers, and there are a fair bit of similarities there. First of all, they both get the German smoke, which, for those unaware, is obviously not a very good trade, because the German smoke is really bad. It's basically the worst smoke you can have. It has a long cooldown, and it has the shortest smoke screen dispersion time, which means it lasts the shortest time. In terms of armor, they both sit at 90 millimeters, so nothing special there. The Z-46 with the HP perk does hit 23,000, which is quite a bit more than the 20,000 of the ZF-6. Neither one gets heal except the potential Lutyens commander proc, of course. Lutyens recommended on basically all German ships because Lutyens is just a fantastic German commander. In terms of gunpowder, we do have some differences, namely the fact that Z46 has quite a bit better DPM. The shells hit harder, it has 3x2 guns, whereas the ZF6 has one dual turret and then 3 single turrets. So you end up with one gun less. You also end up having slightly less HE damage and slightly less AP damage. The shell velocity on the ZF6 is actually higher, but the shells are lighter, and that actually means that the ZF6 does have less penetration than the Z46, so your AP won't perform quite as well. At short ranges it's not very noticeable, but at longer ranges, where the Z46 will have roughly 60 millimeters of pen, the ZF6 will only have 50 millimeters of pen. So it does drop off quite significantly. Even though you have the shell velocity advantage, that difference in air drag and difference in shell weight means that the ZF6 pen just doesn't quite keep up. In terms of DPM, although you do lose to the Z46, I think it was actually by quite a significant margin. The Z46 has 270k AP DPM, whereas the ZF6 has 221, and the HE difference is 109 versus 135. So that extra gun does help the Z46 quite a bit, but you do have the great gimmick equalizer, which you just saw me utilize against that DD during the radar, and that is of course the reload boost. Cutting the reload of the main guns by 50% for 15 seconds just seems to be the right amount of time to delete destroyers. And because these are light German guns with very short fuse, you can easily use them against any enemy DDs. The other advantage that these AP guns have over the Z46 is that you actually have improved pen angles. Your penetration angle is 60 to 67.5 degrees, and for those unaware of the values, you have the same kind of improved penetration angles as the Des Moines, the American heavy cruiser, has. They're not quite as good as the Royal Navy pen angles, but they are still very good, and it means that you can use the AP much more freely than you can on the Z46. Now, this does come with its trade-offs though. Besides just losing out on health and DPM, the reload booster that is, you don't have the German Hydro. So this is a destroyer without any Hydro whatsoever. You do get access to speed boost, but even then you are quite a lot slower than the Z46. In fact, with the speed flag, the ZF6 does 36.8, whereas the Z46 does 39.4. So roughly 10% faster / slower depending on how you look at it. ZF6 also handles a bit better. The rudder shift is slightly better, 3.9 versus I think 4.5 seconds. And the ZF6 actually has better concealment as well, 5.8 versus 5.9. Small differences, but the speed in particular is quite noticeable. And of course, since you don't have access to Hydro, that slight bit of concealment does help you when you do try to force these fights against enemy ships. You have seen me shoot down some planes, but the AA is actually identical to the Z46. Well, not identical, there are very small values, but value differences like 5.8 versus 6 km range. But you have 3 flak puffs and your continuous DPS is quite trash, but you do have access to defensive AA, which considering I am building AFT to increase my range, because I do use the guns quite a bit. It does mean that if the carrier does end up eating your flak, the flak actually does quite a bit of damage, because AFT and defensive AA both enhance the flak damage, which helps you quite significantly, provided he of course eats those flak puffs. The torpedoes are the main difference though. The ZF-6 is kind of just running French Mogador torpedoes. And what this means is while the Z-46 has classic German torps that have 10 km range and hit for 14.4k, and he launches 8 of them, the ZF-6 on the other hand has these hard-hitting French torpedoes, which with very limited range of 8 kilometers, but they do 79 knots if you build for torpedo speed, as I have. Not commander-wise, but I've just slotted the torpedo tube module. And the torpedoes hit like an absolute truck. They hit for 18.4k, aka Mogador French torpedoes. But unlike ships like the Mogador in the ZF-6, it's quite a bit easier to use them, because your stealth is so much more generous at 5.8 with 8 kilometer torpedoes. So I do find myself using the torpedoes quite a bit, and I do find myself scoring quite a lot of hits with them, because, well, 80 knot torpedoes that hit very, very hard are very hard to deal with. And combine that with the fact that you do have access to your reload booster, so if someone damage cons because they ate the torpedo, you can pop reload booster and basically guarantee getting permanent fires on the enemy ship. Overall, I've been playing it a fair bit. A bit of a downside is the turret traverse. It is 20.7 if you don't expert turret traverse, so you lose heavily to Z-46 there. So if your guns are pointed the wrong way and you get ambushed, you get jumped, that is actually quite a big deal, because only your front gun points forward, the dual turret. The rest of the guns take ages to turn, and popping reload booster when all your guns are pointed all over the place does generally leave you without too much damage output. RPF can kind of alleviate this, but I'm actually not running the radio positioning finder on this ship right now. The surface detection is 2.9 on the Z-46 and 2.6 on the ZF-6, and that is a bit of a bigger gap, because that's 300 meters, and considering how important it is to stay undetected, especially in a slower destroyer, that is quite a significant advantage. Considering how ugly the ship is, I'm surprised that people can't see it from further away. I'm sorry, I just think the ship is just fundamentally incredibly ugly. This game is turning out to be quite challenging. We're down a ship. I have managed to secure this A-cap with my division teammate, but the carrier is sending planes here, and the team is struggling on the rest of the map. In fact, we have lost B, and the team is losing D as well. So at this point, my goal is to try to reposition towards B, ideally burn down the Jean-Bart. The idea is good, but I didn't quite think it through, in the sense that I figured, well, if he shoots, I can just farm him during those 20 seconds that he's spotted. But there is, of course, a thunderstorm front, which means that even if he shoots, the amount of time he stays detected is incredibly limited. So as I see the rocket planes come in on the minimap, I decide it's better to smoke up and see if we can get some damage in on him. And this is where I find out that we actually had no one spotting him. The carrier just recalled his planes, and even when he shoots, he stays spotted for a very, very limited amount of time. This is where you also see the German smokes. They bloom for 20 seconds, and then they only last 73 with a 2-minute 30-second cooldown. So you can roughly sit for a bit more than a minute in your smoke, and then it's, well, 1.5 minutes if you fully utilize it, and then you'll still have to wait. So if a carrier just leaves a fighter plane, these things are pretty easy to hunt down by any decent carrier player, because you simply don't have a proper way of disengaging. He stays spotted now, so I pop the reload booster, try to get as much damage in, and here we see, of course, one of the advantages of being a German destroyer. Namely, the German destroyers don't have the same pin rule as the other destroyers, which means that the 128mm guns have a base HE shell armor penetration capacity of 32mm. So this means lightly armored battleships, well, not lightly armored, but I guess you could call it standard armored. I say lightly because there's been so much increases in armor happening across battleships. The standard armored battleships, 32mm, like Richelieu, Jean-Bart, Thunder, Conqueror, Montana, Bow and Stern, and so forth, these areas can be penned by the ZF-6, which means that you get a lot of value out of your HE, and thanks to the improved pin angles, you also get a lot of value out of your AP. So although the raw damage numbers aren't that impressive, the fact that you get full value out of it all the time is what gives it such an edge. Basically, all the tools that the ship has, you get to utilize extremely well. And this is not something that happens. Sometimes you have a tool that's very hard to utilize, but on the ZF-6 all these tools are very easy to utilize. You have enough range and enough concealment to easily utilize the guns, the HE-AP. You have stealthy, and you're stealthy enough to utilize these fast, hard-hitting torpedoes. You have the improved pin angles with enough guns that the reload booster can ambush and delete destroyers. There's a lot of things that just synergize extremely well on the ship. In terms of weaknesses, I'd say a low HP pool, 20k, but even that isn't really that low. Poor German smokes, and the fact that you're slow. But in terms of weaknesses, honestly, that's not very significant. In fact, I find the ship to be very, very powerful. The more I play it, the more confident I am in taking these engagements, and the more value I find myself getting out of it. The Colombo was smoking up, trying to secure the cap in a smoke, but I do drop those torps, and you can just see how stupidly fast those torpedoes are. I don't need to land many torps on a Colombo to delete him, and if he keeps slowing, if he doesn't accelerate quickly, he will be caught by those. So that means A will most likely be secured. Yeah, he's got no way of accelerating out of those, and I am securing B for the team. So this game is still actually quite close. We had a one-ship advantage with landing those torpedoes on the Colombo. We now have a 2-ship advantage, but my Bismarck is just about to go down, so that's obviously not going to last very long. My Veneto seems to be charging into a Yugumo, which is somewhat debatable. Actually, the Yugumo is spotted here, but Bismarck will most certainly go down. So this is still a very, very close game. They still have the points lead because they've been holding the caps, and we are down into a 6 versus 5. However, that was poor timing on the Chapai radar. I just slowed down behind the island, stayed undetected, and now of course I do want to try to hunt down this Yugumo. That's what you do very, very well. And the ZF-6 Veneto goes down, and now it's down to a 5 versus 5, and we're down 150 points. Carrier comes in. I forgot my AA on, a rookie mistake, so I instantly pop defensive AA and reinforce sector, hoping to alleviate the damage he can deal to me. He does leave a fighter plane on top of me, and I don't really want to blow the smoke because the planes seem to be dropping quite quickly, especially with the help I have from the 2 nearby ships. So at this point I'm just trying to juke and stay alive long enough that I can get rid of the planes without having to waste the smoke. I only have 2 smokes remaining, and as I mentioned, these are very short duration, and I don't know if the Yugumo is dropping torps into the smoke. I don't know if the Chapai is pushing in. I don't want to hang around and just waste one of these precious smokes. Instead, we're disengaging. I'm dropping preemptive torps on where I suspect the Marco Polo is coming, and we're gonna go see if we can actually hunt down this Yugumo. Generally, always turn off AA. That was just a mistake from me. I left AA on because I was in a smoke farming the Jean-Bart, and then I forgot to turn it off when I left the smoke again. Simple things, simple mistakes, but they can cost you extremely heavily with carriers in the game. The bombers are coming in. I'm worried that they will be flying right over me. In fact, it looks like they are. And when you're dealing with bombers, generally the further away you open up AA, the better, but I was really hoping I could stay undetected. The reason why you want to open up on bombers further away is because, well, they're going to drop them right on top of you regardless, and it doesn't really affect the bomb dropping trajectory much at which range you open up AA. I actually managed to proc Lutyens' heal there, which was quite fortunate. I spotted all 3 of their ships because, well, the Yugumo shot me, and I think the Chapai was shot as well. So spotting 3 ships does proc Lutyens' heal, which gives you, I think, about 3,000 health. It's not exactly a lot, but on a destroyer with 20,000 health, every single bit counts. This, however, means that they have secured B, and it's starting to get a bit worrisome. It's 5 minutes remaining. They still have a 160 point lead, and they are pushing into the B cap. And I don't know how our Missouri is doing. I don't know why our carrier is still struggling with killing a Massachusetts in FDR, considering how stupidly broken the FDR is. So this is going to be a tough one. And my Donskoy, he is securing the cap, but also the Midway is trying to strike him, which isn't fun for a Donskoy because it doesn't handle quite that well. and it's going to be hard for him to avoid the damage. So I'm going to see if I can make any sort of play here. Maybe I can catch the Yugamo off guard, maybe I can ambush someone. I switch to AP thinking maybe there's someone broadside, and the planes spot me at possibly the worst time that they possibly could, because it gives the Yugamo a bit of a warning. I still decide to try to charge for him because I do think we need to get some kills. And the Yugamo is caught, he's angling away. I instantly switch to HE and I pop the reload booster, trying to get as much damage in on him as possible. HE, not nearly as impressive as the AP, of course. It is German, very low caliber and very low hitting HE. The alpha is just pitiful, but with the reload booster I do enough damage on him that I manage to basically melt him. I also pop Gutalutian's reload booster skill. I drop fast torpedoes on Champayev who's pushing in on me, and I duck behind the island to make sure they can't pick up the kill, especially since I just popped my damage gun. The torps are actually quite scary for the Chapayev, because if the Chapayev doesn't have hydro, Chapayev doesn't handle that well. Chapayev isn't really that agile of a ship. So I'm suspecting that he's going to try to dip around the island, and that's exactly what he tried to do. And he catches only 2 torpedoes, but those 2 torpedoes were enough to devastate him and pick up the Confederate and the Kraken. And at this point, I'm of course just charging down the carrier. They still have a points lead because they have had such camp control for such a long time, but I know that if we pick up the carrier, there's not much they can do to really stop us. He comes in with the torpedo bombers. Of course I have AA constantly active now because, well, there's no point since I'm shooting, no point to try to play stealthy at this point. I'm getting a lot of bounces because midway deck armor is quite hilarious, and I think at this point Maltese actually just lets me have the midway, so thank you for that. I think he could have finished him off himself if he wanted to, but regardless, that is a dead midway, and that is kill a number 6 for the team. At this point, there's not really much they can do. Even if they pick up the Missouri, we'll be able to contest D, or honestly, it's unlikely that Marco Polo can kill enough ships to change this around with 2 minutes 46 remaining. Massachusetts finally gets sunk by the FDR. That took him a very long time. I'm not sure how he managed to keep our FDR occupied for that long, but that means the Marco Polo is all alone and about to get focused from every possible side. So I turn broadside and just start getting as many shells in on him as possible. I still actually had 2 reload boosters remaining. I am running a fairly safe build here. I am running a superintendent build, so that's probably why. But I didn't really find too many good opportunities to pop reload booster. I popped it on both the DDs, and generally there weren't really any like haha full broadside cruiser that I could do huge damage on, or someone who damage con where I could do a huge amount of damage on. I tend to maybe be a bit too conservative on them with the reload boosters, because I rather have the reload booster and have one in spare than be missing it and need it. Because if you don't have the reload booster, ZF-6 reload, well, it's a Z46 with 1 less gun and less alpha, which isn't exactly impressive. 2.5 million credits, but that's because, well, it's a tier 9 premium and I am running a lot of credit flags and stuff on it because, well, it's my EU account. And I'm just swimming in resources on my EU account, so that's why I get all the money bonuses possible, except for basically the camo. I'm running the super ugly camo, the one that you get for basically whaling the ship, because I find it hilarious, because it's so ugly that it makes me happy. Devastating Strike, Confederate, Kraken, and First Blood. Only about 140,000 damage, but the impact on the game was quite significant. 24 planes shot down and 2 solo caps as well. Team score wise, we put in some really heavy work. 3.2k base for me, and Maltese on the Donskoy with almost 2.6k base as well. So just a very strong duo. The reload booster works exceptionally well if you have someone who knows how to use radar. We only got to use it once against that one destroyer, but he made the mistake of trying to turn away instead of just hiding behind the island, and the ZF-6 with the reload booster knows how to capitalize on those kinds of mistakes. Detailed report-wise, 68,000 spotting, only about 400,000 potential damage, and in terms of ammunition choice, a fair mix of HE and AP. Of course, if it hadn't been for the Storm, the Cyclone, if there had been more long-range ships to farm, I would probably have been using a lot more HE, because you can just farm ships across the map with that. Note that the Chapayev ate 35,000 damage from only those 2 torpedoes, basically his entire health pool. That is the power of those French torpedoes. They hit so damn hard that you can take out ships with just a couple of them. Pretty poor fire RNG, but then again your fire chance is quite low. The base fire chance on the ZF-6 is only 7% with the flags. So, well, if RNG favors you, it will work out. If it doesn't, that's just the way it goes. We actually did proc the Lutyens heal, which doesn't happen often. And overall, I'd say this was a pretty good example of all the strengths of this ship, as well as some of the weaknesses, namely the slow speed, but more importantly, all the torpedo and the firepower, both the HE and AP firepower that this thing has. The reload booster really just helps this thing become I'm not sure if I'd call it an overpowered destroyer, but very strong. I haven't played the ship enough to make a claim to say, hey, this ship is just straight up overpowered, but I would absolutely say it's a strong ship. It has its weaknesses, but it has a lot of strengths to make up for those. Anyways, let me show you guys my recommended build for the ship. Alright, starting off, we can admire the beautiful, beautiful camo, of course. I'm not sure what they were thinking with this one. Equipment-wise, absolutely turret survival. I've had my front turret permanently broken, and I can tell you it is not a fun experience. Speed boost, the extra duration on it, because lack of speed is one of your greatest weaknesses. The speed boost is only 8%, but trust me, it still helps. I am running the torpedo tubes mod 1, mostly because I find the dispersion good enough, and I don't really rate any of the other options here. And the benefit of running the torpedo tubes mod 1 is of course that it also reduces the risk of your torpedo tubes becoming incapacitated by -40%. And this can be extremely valuable when you're YOLOing enemy ships, because you'll find that they don't break quite as often. Acceleration module, because your rudder shift is quite good at 3.9. Concealment, and finally faster reload on the main guns. When it comes to captain build, obviously I do recommend Lutyens. He's got a lot of nice things like main battery loader that you'll enjoy, and sometimes you might even proc resilient. It's not gonna heal you a lot, but I mean 9x3, it's not bad. It's not the end of it. It helps you a bit, but once again, nothing really that special. In terms of build, the base build I would say is you go preventive maintenance, you go last stand, and then you go survivability expert. And I'd say AR. These are mandatory skills. Now at this point you do have a fair bit of options how you build it. Some people completely forego concealment expert. They just build it like your Z-46 gun builds. Basically you go for things like Fearless Brawler, or you just go BFT, where you just farm. That's what you're aiming for. You're just aiming to farm as much damage as possible. They even forego Superintendent as well. Personally, I like this build because it gives me a lot of flexibility. I can do a bit of long-range farming if need be with AFT, or main battery and air expert. The additional Superintendent gives me a bit more consumable flexibility. I don't find myself running out. And Concealment Expert means that I can actually utilize the very good 5.8 chem concealment. I think it's an excellent concealment. And it allows me to push into objectives. So I can kind of do a jack of all trades. I can push objectives, I can farm, I can torpedo. I can do everything, and considering the level of play we see in World of Warships these days, being able to do everything is very, very attractive to me in a destroyer. The final point I've placed into incoming fire alert. Overall, I'd say the base recommended build, a solid build, all-round build would probably be preventive maintenance 1 point, last stand total of 3 points, add in survivability expert total of 6 points, add in concealment expert 10 points, adding AR 13 point captain, and then you can add main battery, basically AFT, and you got a 17 pointer. At this point, save up for Superintendent, and if you have a point extra, go for incoming fire alert. There are plenty of options. I think the ship can be built in a multitude of ways, but I really like this one. You can go for things like extra heavy AP shells, especially after the commander rework when they're buffing it, since that will contribute a fair bit of extra AP damage. So there will be a fair bit of options, a fair bit of ways to play this and build this ship, because As I mentioned, the ship is very flexible. There are a lot of things that you can do with it. Flag-wise, it's once again straightforward. DD flags. You run detonation, you run fire flags, you run speed, you run faster consumables, and then anything else is up to you. I generally don't waste the Sierra or the X-ray pop-up ones on the ZF-6 because it doesn't really benefit that much. Anyway, that was my ZF-6. Kind of first impressions. I've only been playing it for a day, but I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys next time.